Welcome back to another question period with David Krayden. I'm your host again today, and we're visiting question period on Monday, October 30th. And we're expecting Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre to lead off with some questions about whether or not Justin Trudeau is prepared to pause the carbon tax on natural gas heating fuel, which affects the rest of Canada, not just Atlantic Canada. Or is this just a political ploy? What is he up to? So we are just listening. I'll just let you listen to the end of the statements by members. And we definitely want to hear the first couple of questions from the opposition leader, Pierre Poilievre. And if Mr. Trudeau's in the House or not, we'll see. But we'll see what the answer is to the question, because we know the answer is going to be no. But it's going to be interesting to see what happens here. So, anyway, thank you for joining me today. And this should be an interesting hour, whatever it is now, because the speaker never starts on time. He's late. Well, late again today. We'll see what happens. We will see what happens.
The honourable member for Winnipeg Centre.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I remember the story of my father, a Holocaust survivor. After arriving in Canada, he and my grandmother would hide under the table when they heard a plane because they were worried about being bombed. My grandmother and father were riddled with trauma. My grandmother as a survivor of the concentration camps, and my father as a child in hiding during the war. My father became a peace activist. In fact, he lost a teaching job in the 60s after he refused to take off his peace button. I think of the families and children in Gaza right now who will lose their whole family as a result of war, and the Israeli children being held hostage who will live with similar trauma as my grandmother and father. I know if my dad and grandmother were alive, they would be calling for an immediate ceasefire. They would not want anyone to endure what they had to in life. In honor of my father, Albert Gazan, and my grandmother, Gina Gazan, I call for a ceasefire now, the release of all hostages, and not to disrespect their legacies as Holocaust survivors to justify ethnic cleansing, not in their names. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Thérèse de Blainville. Mr. Speaker, from October 30th to November 3rd, the Mouvement Autonome et Solidaire des Sans-Emploi is organizing National Unemployment Week. I would like to applaud this initiative, in which a number of groups defending the rights of the unemployed in several regions of Quebec are mobilizing to remind the Liberal government of its...
And please keep your comments coming today. I don't see anybody on right now. Please join us. I invite you to send your comments. I try to reply to them. And we're in a very difficult time in Canadian history right now. I think we all have to pay careful attention.
For years, and will continue to do so. In these times of economic uncertainty, the need for reform is more apparent than ever. This is more than necessary, Mr. Speaker. In fact, it's urgent. We stand in solidarity. Happy National Unemployment Week.
You ever heard of that before?
The honourable member for Stormont, Dundas, South Glengarry.
Mr. Speaker, the saying goes, desperate people do desperate things. And after 8 years, this is exactly what we saw from the Prime Minister last week with his last-minute desperate announcement on the carbon tax.
Hello, John Thomas Kane.
His own minister admitted the exemption was granted to all Canadians across the country because they didn't vote.
Hi, Dennis.
Liberal.
Watching from Saskatchewan. Well, thank you for joining us.
Just how ineffective and out of touch are
waiting for those
MPs
first questions to come up right now. We're still in the statement.
That they couldn't get the same deal back home. Winters are pretty cold in Northern Ontario too, and they should be treated the same as everybody else. Here's our common sense Conservative plan. Take the carbon tax off all home heating for all Canadians. And let's be clear, Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister did not try this because Canadians are hurting. He only did this because he is hurting. After 8 years, Mr. Mr. Speaker. Canadians know he's just not worth the cost, and now with his latest plan, even he knows it too.
The Honourable Member for St. John's East.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Our price on pollution incentivizes greener choices and puts more money back in families' pockets. But we heard from many on home heating oil. While they wanted to switch, they needed more time and support. And we listened. Now, home heating oil will be exempt from the price on pollution for 3 years. We're giving free heat pumps to those below the medium income, plus $250 to sign up. We're hoping to get rid of the upfront cost of heat pumps for everyone else. And we're doubling the rural top-up to 20%. The plan saves people energy and it saves them money. Thank you.
Questions are
Oral question.
the honourable member, the honourable leader of the opposition.
Mr. Speaker, after 8 years, the Prime Minister has finally admitted that he's not worth it. After how many years? Well, the carbon tax has done nothing for the environment, and it actually hampers families. Just minutes before I was going to host a big gathering in a Liberal riding to cut the carbon tax, the Prime Minister flip-flopped, but he didn't eliminate the second carbon tax that applies to Quebec with the support of the Bloc. We'll be consistent and eliminate the second carbon tax for the Quebecers and all Canadians. The Honourable Minister. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to remind the Leader of the Opposition that
Trudeau.
we have been consistent. But I'd also like to remind him that today, as climate change hits Canadians and people across the planet, a party that wants to be a responsible government has to take account of climate change and help with affordability. And in terms of the Conservatives, there's nothing there. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Knew that this Prime Minister was not worth the cost. We just didn't realize he would admit it himself. But here's what it took. I was moments away from holding a massive 1,000-person rally of common sense Nova Scotians to axe the tax. The Prime Minister heard the news. He was huddled up in a ball in the fetal position, sweating bullets as Liberal MPs pounded on his office door, asking for some relief. But only some relief came, Mr. Speaker, not for everyone everywhere. Will I need to hold massive axe the tax rallies in every Liberal riding to finally do away with it?
So you can see there's no Justin Trudeau there today.
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This government has developed and will be rolling out a plan to deploy heat pumps, free heat pumps in Atlantic Canada and across the country. It will address affordability issues, put more money back in the pockets of Canadians, and actually help us to address climate change, something that the opposition members seem to ignore on an ongoing basis.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Admitted that he's not worth the cost by announcing that he would pause his carbon tax for some people on some fuels for some period of time. And then his Rural Affairs Minister said that other Canadians could have had the same pause, but for the fact that they didn't elect Liberals. Apparently, we're going to have different tax rates in different constituencies depending on how people vote. Why is it, Mr. Speaker, that the Liberal MPs in Thunder Bay, North Bay, Sudbury, Sault Ste. Marie, other freezing cold communities are not getting the same break? Is it because their local Liberal MP is utterly useless?
Good one.
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Certainly, it is very important that we are addressing both affordability concerns and fighting climate change across this country. The heat pump program, the Honourable Leader of the Opposition, if he'd done his homework, would know applies across the country. It actually will help to ensure that we are reducing the costs of home heating, oil heating in every province and territory while continuing to address climate change in a thoughtful way.
Then I have
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
That is hot air in cold weather. Just today, the snow started following in cold Ottawa. Edmonton's also cold. It has Liberal MPs. Winnipeg, they call it Winterpeg for a reason. People there are forced to pay tax on natural gas. All these cities have Liberal MPs. The Prime Minister claims that he only backed down on the carbon tax for some Canadians because of the advocacy of terrified Liberal members. So is he really saying that Liberal MPs in the areas where this pause does not apply are totally useless and will never be able to defend Canadians heating their homes?
Then I have Minister.
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the Leader of the Opposition knows that Canadians who live in jurisdictions where the price on pollution applies get over $1,000 a year from the Government of Canada to fight climate change. When it comes to the Conservatives, they want to take that $1,000 out of the pockets of Canadians, Mr. Speaker. Our climate policy has resulted in 53 megatons being removed. That's the equivalent of 11 million cars a year. Mr. Speaker, while they keep their heads in the sand and pretend that climate change isn't real, we're going to fight climate change and we're going to help Canadians with affordability. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Oh, it's just too much.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Foreign Affairs Minister says that if Canadians want a pause from the carbon tax, they need to elect a local Liberal MP. She's got it exactly wrong. What they need to do is elect a common sense Conservative government that will axe the tax entirely. This is not only hurting the pocketbook of Canadians or forcing seniors to choose between eating and heating. Now, Saskatchewan, Alberta, BC, and Ontario are asking for similar breaks. In fact, the Saskatchewan government is refusing to collect the tax on the utility. Does the Prime Minister realize that he is not only bankrupting Canadians and leaving them in the cold, he's actually dividing our country?
Then I have Minister.
The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, look, as a resident of Ontario, I remember the last time that a province elected a common sense Conservative government, Mr. Speaker. Look what they did to education. Look how they gutted healthcare. Look what happened with Walkerton, Mr. Speaker. We know as Canadians what happens when you elect common sense Conservatives. They gut programs, they hurt Canadians, and they're certainly not there when it comes to fighting climate change or supporting Canadians. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Not a bunch of liars. And that one who celebrated a Nazi being in the House of Commons is the worst. All right, let's just make a few comments here. Very interesting. The Liberals are suggesting that every Canadian is getting $1,000 back because of the carbon tax rebate, and that somehow, even if you're getting that $1,000, it's more than it's costing you to fill your gas tank with the carbon tax and to heat your home with the carbon tax. I don't know anybody who's gotten $1,000 from this government. And and here's another point you should know. These heat pumps that are free? No, they're not free. They're only free to people who are essentially living below the poverty line. The median income. People who are below or at the median income don't own homes, will not be applying for the grant because they won't need a heat pump. They won't. Where are they going to put it? And this is all a pack of lies. Everything here is a pack of lies. They are doing this pause in the carbon tax only because the Atlantic Canadian MPs, Liberal MPs, are scared as hell of losing their seats. Trudeau reacted to that It's the last political bastion he has in Canada, and he's fighting to keep that by pausing the carbon tax just for those people there. So this is a absolute crock. And I cannot believe the bald-faced lies we're getting from this Trudeau government today. Oh, of course I believe it. But it is absolutely incredible how they can stand up and lie like this. But anyway, let's listen to a little more.
When we're talking about CEBA in Canada, it's an account we established to help companies and organizations throughout the pandemic. We delayed the reimbursement till the end of 2023. There's a portion that is non-refundable. And then we also extended it by another couple of weeks so the companies could make some adjustments and benefit from that non-refundable portion. But we can't scare organizations and companies for nothing. The honourable member for Burnaby South.
On home heating only benefits Canadians that live where Liberals need to save their seats. All Canadians need some relief when it comes to the cost of home heating. That's why New Democrats propose taking the GST off of all home heating. That would help all Canadians. But it's a measure that Liberals and Conservatives have both opposed. So when will the Liberals stop playing games and bring in relief for all Canadians this cold winter?
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And again, I would just say that folks in the chamber need to do their homework. This program actually applies across the country. The rebate applies, the doubling of the rural top-up applies across the country. The heat pump program applies across the country. It applies to all folks who are actually challenged by the cost right now of home heating oil.
Honourable member from Burnaby South.
Doug Ford et le Greenbelt sont l'exemple.
Doug Ford and the Greenbelt are the perfect example of the Conservative strategy on housing. They sell interest to their rich promoter friends. And the Liberals, after 8 years, have not done better. Record rent prices, rent evictions. The worst record in the G7. It benefits those who are profiting from the crisis, not those who are facing it. We need to build. What is the government doing to build not-for-profit housing? The Honourable Minister. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to remind my honourable colleague that I am opposed to what the Ford government was trying to do in the GTA. And the Conservatives did support this. We are in favor of environmental protection across the country. In the last month, we signed agreements with the Northwest Territories, Nunavut, and Nova Scotia to protect 1,000 square meters of territory across the country. That's 4 times the size of the Great Britain, and we still have much work to do. The honourable member for Thornhill.
Liberal NDP government is finally saying the quiet part out loud. They admitted that their carbon tax makes life more unaffordable and does nothing to help the environment. But only certain people get relief. Those who happen to live in places where Liberal polling numbers are the worst. Everyone else gets told that their vote doesn't matter and that they don't care. If the Liberals can take the carbon tax off for some Canadians, why can't they take it off for all Canadians?
Hey, watch, there'll be another non-answer here because they can't, in all honesty, answer this question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As I've said a number of times, this program applies across the country in every province and territory of this country. We have developed a solution with respect to home heating oil that will put more money back into the pockets of Canadians. It will continue to fight and reduce emissions. It will address both the climate issue and challenges with respect to affordability.
The honourable member from Thornhill.
The minister can
line.
rely on his prepared talking points all he wants, but that wasn't quite how the Minister for Rural Economic Development spun it yesterday. She told Canadians that if they wanted to be exempted from Liberal carbon taxes, they had to wait for it. Vote Liberal. My neighbors in the GTA have a question then for the minister. They have 24 Liberal MPs in Toronto, 11 in Peel, 7 in York, 10 of them are cabinet ministers. If this is the largest concentration of Liberal ridings in Canada, then why are they still paying a carbon tax?
The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, home heating oil is a challenge not just for Atlantic Canadians, but for many in rural Canada. That has been the case for many years, but became more forceful in the last couple of years as the price of home heating oil skyrocketed, went up 75% in 2022. What I would say is we've come up with a solution that actually will enable Canadians to do the right thing with respect to fighting climate change. We'll actually put more money in their pockets. It is a good solution for the climate. It is a good solution for the affordability of Canadians in Atlantic Canada and everywhere across this country.
Then I have
the honourable member for Dufferin.
Has finally admitted the carbon tax makes heating your home more expensive, and he's pausing the carbon tax in Atlantic Canada. And we know why, because the Minister for Long Range Mountains said Atlantic MPs forced the Prime Minister to do it. So actually what the Prime Minister is saying after 8 years is that if you're a Liberal MP from Brampton, Toronto, Mississauga, or Thunder Bay, your voice doesn't matter at all. You can't have any change. They are effectively useless. So will the Prime Minister stop playing politics with the carbon tax and just axe it?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, as a member of Parliament from Ontario, I know that Ontario families get over $1,000 a year for fighting pollution, Mr. Speaker.
Lie.
I guess that Ontario MP wants to take that $1,000 right out of their pockets, Mr. Speaker. That's exactly what he's advocating for. Instead, our government is committed to making sure that we help Canadians not just fight pollution, not just fight climate change, but also deal with affordability. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
These people are just beyond reason.
Then I have
the honourable member for Dufferin Caledon.
Now we've just been treated to the great carbon tax fable. First, it was revenue neutral. Second, you get more money than you pay into it. Third, it doesn't. It fights climate change.
You didn't get $1,000.
Mr. Speaker. What it does, and what the Prime Minister's admitted by pausing the carbon tax, is it makes it more expensive for everyone. The real tragedy is for MPs, is for Canadians outside of Atlantic Canada. Why? It's not being paused. And no, most people heat their homes in Ontario, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, BC, and Quebec, not with heating oil. It doesn't apply across the country. Will they stop playing politics, picking winners and looters, dividing Canadians, and axe the tax?
Colleagues, let I have minute.
The honourable minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to correct a record. When we came into power in 2015, projections in emission growth in Canada were going that in 2030 we would be 80 million tons above our 2005 levels. We took that out of the atmosphere, Mr. Speaker, and we've reduced emissions by another 50 million tons. That's the equivalent of removing from our roads more than 20 million vehicles, Mr. Speaker. That's one of the things that we've done in the last 8 years. We've done so many
Which
more
means
things to
you've
fight
done
climate
nothing.
change. We have the best record of all G7 countries, something that never happened, not once.
Living in
under the
fantasy
Conservative
land.
Party for 10 years, Mr. Speaker.
This eco-extremist nutcake.
Before I give the floor to the honourable member, I'd just like to encourage all members
Shut up for a while.
Wait your turn.
Shut up. Do you believe what's going on here? Where they're claiming their heat pumps are going to solve the problem.
And panicked. And what did he do? He paused the carbon tax in Atlantic Canada. And yesterday, his environment minister said in an interview that he wasn't even prepared to help Canadians in his own province. And this is humiliating for Quebecers who also pay the carbon tax. Quebecers also have to eat and pay for gas. Well, the Prime Minister announced the complete, not just temporary, withdrawal of the second carbon tax that applies to Quebec.
And of course, this clown Trudeau is not even in attendance again today.
Minister, Mr. Speaker, I would ask
So they
my
send
honourable
up the
colleague
Greenpeace
to go
activists.
back and listen to the show on Radio Canada, and I'm happy he does listen to it because we do fund CBC and Radio Canada. But what I said was that all the measures that we have put in place in terms of dental care, daycares, and the fight against climate change are all measures that the Conservative Party of Canada is opposed. The honourable
Nothing
member
to
for
do with
Charles
the
Saint Charles.
question.
Like the tax, I didn't just listen to the show once, twice, but 3 times, and that's wrong. The minister even said that as long as he will be Minister of the Environment, he will not make any other modifications to the tax in Canada. He confirmed that there will be no changes as he's in place. So what is the Prime Minister going to do with that? But right now, the Bloc is supporting the carbon tax, and they say it doesn't apply to Quebec. And at the same time, they want to radically increase it. At the end of the day, what is this government doing?
Total hypocrisy from these damn liberals.
Minister. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think if he listened to the show once, twice, or 3 times, he would have practiced his question once, twice, or 3 times. Yes, there is a carbon price in place across the country. And yes, we make sure that there will be a mechanism that will be fair for all Canadians, and we support Canadians in the fight against climate change, and also in terms of affordability.
No, I have
the honourable member for Salaberry-sur-Roi. Mr. Speaker, the federal government.
All right, we don't have to listen to this. What you see what's going on here is that they are lying about 2 things. Lying about this rebate that I'm hearing people in the comment section say, I never got $1,000. I didn't either. I don't know anybody who got $1,000. And even if they did, it would be outweighed by the amount of money we're spending on the gas tax and home heating fuel tax. And that is, and for them to suggest that everybody's going to get a free heating pump is a lie. In fact, nobody or very few people who own homes will be eligible to get their free heat pump because they won't be living below the median income, which is basically the poverty line. So this is the game the Liberals are playing here, saying everybody is going to get a free heat pump. And this is, of course, is nonsense, and it's a bald-faced lie, and they know it's a lie. They know what they're doing. They know what they're saying here. And to suggest that this is not politically motivated, well, any idiot, any moron can tell you it's politically motivated when it only applies to one region in the country, because that's the only region that's using oil for home heating. And the rest of the country is using natural gas. But no, they get no pause on their carbon tax because those ridings are not integral to Justin Trudeau's fortress liberal. What's left of it. This is an absolute outrage. This is an absolute outrage that they can get away with this, and they have to be held accountable. And perhaps this will encourage the hypocritical NDP to finally break ranks with these god-awful lying liberals, because that's exactly what they are. If you can stand it, we'll listen to some more.
Loans for a 2-year period or more, depending on the date, and with a portion that may be non-refundable if reimbursement is done before the deadline. We could also extend the deadline without having to pay back the loan at the beginning of next year. You can extend the reimbursement till the end of next year. The honourable member for Mirabel. Mr. Speaker, it's not true that the government is flexible. It's not true either that it's financially responsible. If it were, it would do everything to avoid the bankruptcy of 250,000 companies. If it were...
All right, we don't. This is a total, completely irrelevant to what's actually going on in the world. The blockheads will never understand what a real national crisis is because they don't believe in the nation, except the little province of Quebec. That's all they believe in. And every time they stand up to ask any question, I take it all with a grain of salt because they are not invested in this country. They are not invested in our future. They are not invested in anything except their own pensions, which they shouldn't be getting as separatists.
When they did ask for more support, we offered them greater financing flexibility and more time with a one-year extension of the deadline for reimbursement. Thank you.
President.
The honourable member for Foothills.
It must be in the air because the Prime Minister has announced his re-election campaign. Vote Liberal in 3 years, we're going to quadruple the carbon tax on home heating, gas and groceries. After 8 years, this Prime Minister is in a panic mode because he knows his NDP Liberal government isn't worth the cost. And now we have a Liberal minister from Long Range Mountains, Newfoundland, Labrador, admitting that only Canadians who vote Liberal will get an exemption from the carbon tax. Well, what about the Liberal minister from Edmonton Centre or the Liberal MP from Calgary Skyview? Were these MPs so incompetent and so out of touch they couldn't secure an exemption on the carbon tax for Albertans? Yeah.
Just caught them in their own machination.
Carbon pricing works. It both reduces emissions and puts more money in the pockets of middle-class families. We made a decision to attack a highly polluting source of fuel, home heating oil, in a different way so we can get rid of it faster. Mr. Speaker, we're doing this by making a record investment in heat pump technology, which is not only going to reduce emissions at a household level, it's going to save families thousands of dollars every year. This is sensible policy. It's good for the environment, it's good for the economy, and it's good for
heat pumps do not work in the winter of most of Canada. These people either are unaware of that or they're bald-faced liars.
The carbon tax works only if it's politically expedient. The Prime Minister's carbon tax exemption doesn't help 97% of Canadians who are already struggling to put food on the table and heat their homes. Now we have a Liberal minister from Newfoundland, Labrador, telling Albertans that the only reason you're not getting an exemption is you didn't vote Liberal. So is the Liberal minister from Edmonton Centre and the Calgary Liberal MP from Skyview not defending Alberta families? Were they not defending their own 81% of their constituents who rely on natural gas to heat their homes will not get a carbon tax exemption? Will these Liberal MPs from Alberta stand in this House, defend their constituents, and admit their Prime Minister is not worth the cost?
Mr. Speaker, well, I guess that member didn't hear the minister earlier when he said that home heating oil was exempted right across the country. Furthermore, for his constituents in Alberta, they're getting over $1,000 a year in a climate
This is the half-witted minister, House Leader, who wanted to redact all evidence of her celebrating a Waffen-SS veteran at the House of Commons. She wanted to erase that from history. That's the kind of people the Liberal cabinet has.
They're reckless and they're not worth the risk. Thank you.
Really, I would seek the cooperation of all members, please, to keep your comments so that the speaker can hear the questions, but also so that the person who would ask the questions can certainly hear the response. The honourable member from Peace River, Prince George, Northern Rockies.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. After 8 years, this desperate Prime Minister in total freefall finally admitted that his carbon tax is punishing Canadians. The Prime Minister also announced in his re-election platform that to vote Liberal in Yukon means quadrupling the carbon tax on home heating. And this weekend, the Minister from Newfoundland admitted the exemption didn't apply to all Canadians across the country, including all Yukoners. My question is for the Liberal Member of Parliament for Yukon, will he step up and stand up to this Prime Minister and demand that the carbon tax be permanently removed for all Yukoners.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As I've said a number of times, this program and the heat pump program actually applies in every province and territory across this country. But I would also suggest that yes, disproportionately there are more heat pumps and more heating oil in Atlantic Canada. We actually are focused on ensuring we are addressing pressing needs in every part of the country, including providing significant funding for abandoned oil and gas wells in Alberta and British Columbia.
Moron.
Mr. Speaker, Canadians right across this country are struggling with the cost of home heating, and Canadians right across this country want to be part of fighting climate change. Yet, while this government sweetened the heat pump rebate for Atlantic Canada, the rest of Canadians are stuck with a lengthy bureaucratic application process that only gets them 1/3 of that dollar amount. It does seem, Mr. Speaker, like these Liberals care more about rural Canada when they hold seats there than they do about helping everyone across this country. So will the minister stand today and commit to increasing the federal heat pump rebate for all Canadians?
And the heat pumps are useless. These are they're investing
Again,
millions,
Mr. Speaker, it is important that folks actually
potentially
do their
billions,
homework. There is
in
an
a
existing
program that's useless.
program across this country that provides grants of $10,000. It actually enables people to get a check within 3 days. It applies just as much in British Columbia as it does in Newfoundland and Labrador. Last week, we announced we were increasing that by another $5,000 so long as provinces actually step up to be part of the solution. So yes, the answer is yes.
These people are crackpots. Oh, here's an answer for Haley Land. Just asked, how much are heat pumps? They're at least $20,000 US plus the installation costs. So, based on this Liberal formula, if you don't meet the criteria for getting a free one, which is essentially so poor you're below the poverty line and you'll never be owning a house and you won't be asking for a free one, it's going to take you 20 years to pay back the so-called cost savings. And the heat pump doesn't work in temperatures below minus 17 degrees Celsius. So most of Canada in January, February is at minus 20, sometimes minus 40. So this is a worthless product and a worthless program from a worthless government. And it's amazing to me that they continue. They have the gall to stand up and pretend they're doing something for any of us. This is a blatant and a completely hypocritical and a completely cynical political move.
Voted on my private member's bill C-252, which aims to prohibit the marketing of unhealthy foods and beverages to children aged 13 and under. While the block...
Oh, fuck. More ban-happy liberals, eh? The health of Canadians would be better served by getting rid of people like you immediately. Oh, God. Do we have to listen to this? And here's this piece of baggage, Paul Holland, who's now the health minister. What a travesty that is. Oh. I can't listen to this man. He is so absent of any thought. He is just a walking talking point.
Then I have Deputy Barry Innisfil.
An obvious, desperate prime minister admitted his carbon tax is punishing Canadians and making life unaffordable. After 8 years, he finally proved to himself last Thursday that he's not worth the cost. And his only strategy at this point is not about climate, it's about protecting his Liberal MPs. In Sudbury Nickel Belt, 55% of homes are heated by natural gas. Yet for these struggling Canadians, they get no exemption from heating their homes. Now, the Leader of the Opposition has proposed to axe the tax in all forms of home heating for every Canadian. Will the Prime Minister agree with that?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Earlier, I spoke about our record in terms of greenhouse gas reduction, which, no thanks to the Conservative Party, we've been able to do.
And which makes no difference at all to any global warming
that are being deployed.
index.
10% of sales now in Canada are electric vehicles, something the Leader of the Opposition doesn't even believe in. He thinks it's a myth. Whereas 10 years ago, 1 in 25 vehicles sold in the world was electric. Today, it's 1 in 5 around the world, Mr. Speaker. We're catching up to the rest of the world, no thanks to the Conservative Party of Canada.
Not. We got one person commenting that he thinks a heat pump installed is $10,000 Canadian. Wrong. Look it up. Look it up. And it is nowhere near 10,000 Canadian, and they do not work at temperatures below minus 17 degrees Celsius. So this is a crock.
Don't vote for Liberals will be punished with higher taxes. She insulted Canadians and gave a slap in the face to her coalition partners. What about the NDP MP for Timmins James Bay? Can the minister tell us why the NDP partners are so incompetent and ineffective? They couldn't get a tax break on home heating for people suffering in Northern Ontario.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It is important to address affordability. That is exactly what we are doing with the heat pump program to ensure that people are actually saving money. It's also important that we actually are fighting climate change in a thoughtful and substantive way.
Yeah, of course.
I do find this question a little bit odd coming from the only member in the House of Commons who voted against the Paris Agreement.
And of course, the heat pumps are not even carbon neutral. That's the other thing they're not telling you. It's just a stupid replacement product that's not going to work.
If I could ask for your attention, the honourable member from Renfrew and Nipissing, Pembroke.
And Mr. Speaker, this Prime Minister once said a Canadian is a Canadian is a Canadian. After 8 long years, now he says some Canadians are more equal than other Canadians. The NDP Liberal government is so desperate to cling on to power, they will pay any price. This Prime Minister is not worth the cost of national unity. Will the Liberals introduce legislation today, listening to the Leader of the Opposition, and axe the tax on all home heating for all Canadians?
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm not sure how many times I need to repeat in this House that the program applies to all Canadians, all provinces and territories across the country. We are addressing a particularly acute issue with respect to home heating. Most folks in this chamber should be
thank you,
aware that this has
Stephen
been an issue
Corvo.
for a number of years.
Exactly.
We are doing that
20K US for
accelerating the
installation.
deployment of heat pumps that will save people money and
So
will
let's
continue
stop
to help us
playing
to address
games
climate
with
change. That is a
$10,000
responsible,
Canadian.
thoughtful way to approach public policy.
And they're not carbon neutral. And they don't work very well when it really gets cold. And these liberals know that. They're playing this game with us.
Finally admitted that his carbon tax is unaffordable for Canadians. But instead of removing the carbon tax for all Canadians, the Prime Minister chose to further divide this country by only helping those who voted for it. The Liberals are saying the Manitobans didn't deserve the tax relief because they didn't vote Liberal. Unfortunately, Manitoba elected 4 Liberals. Why did the Manitoba Liberal minister from St. Boniface, St. Vital fail to get a carbon tax exemption on home heating for Manitoba?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, again, the member opposite clearly wasn't listening to the minister when he said that home heating oil exemptions apply right across the country. But Mr. Speaker, what's more is that folks in Manitoba get a rebate from the price on pollution. So not only are we helping Canadians to fight climate change, which I remind my colleagues is an existential threat to our well-being, we are also helping them with the high
You
cost
are
of
an
living.
existential
So
threat
instead of
to our
taking their
well-being.
money away, Mr. Speaker, they should be joining us in ensuring that we can all provide more supports to Canadians. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Berthier-Masquinongé. Mr. Speaker, our farmers continue to suffer from the catastrophic weather in July. In a survey, the UPA revealed that the rains had ravaged no less than 60% of Quebec's market garden acreage. Respondents lost a third of their turnover in the midst of an inflation crisis. Worse still, more than half of producers believe that this damage will also have an impact on the harvest of 2024. Mr. Speaker, what is needed is 1, emergency aid for horticultural producers, and 2, a 1-year postponement of the repayment of the emergency account. When is the government finally going to act? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. Mr. Speaker, our thoughts are for all those in this country that have been affected by catastrophic weather, forest fires, for example. Producers and farmers
it's time to get back to the forest
on
fires.
the front line against climate change. We know that devastation imposed by extreme weather events and forest fires
all
throughout the
to do
country
with climate change.
have made these times very difficult for
These
many of these
people
people.
are so
And we will continue
immersed
to be here
in
for
their
them. We'll continue to
idiotic
work together
talking points.
so that we
They
can
are
make sure
incapable of
that we
thinking.
meet their needs. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Honourable Member for Berthier-Masquinongé. Mr. Speaker, the Minister doesn't seem to understand the urgency of the situation. Among root vegetable growers, 64% of land has been ravaged by rain. For strawberries and raspberries, the figure is 73%. For pea growers, it's 88%. That, Mr. Speaker, will have an impact on food prices if the government does not intervene. Everyone is affected by this. Mr. Speaker, we need emergency aid. We need a 1-year postponement of the repayment of the emergency account. And we're also running out of time. When will the minister finally understand?
Here's a question for you. If climate change is responsible for forest fires, and the carbon tax is supposedly fighting climate change, why were there more forest fires this year than any other time in recent history? Obviously, one thing isn't working. The carbon tax obviously has no effect on climate change if climate change is responsible for forest fires. But these liberals are so incredibly dense, they can't even address that or admit that basic fact. They will just stick to their talking points and put up this Greenpeace advocate, extremist like Guilbeault, to answer questions that are meaningless.
And l'essentiel in my riding. 1 in 10 people use food counters and food banks. After 8 years of this government, helped by the Bloc Québécois, nothing works anymore. It costs a lot to vote Bloc. Friday's announcement by the Prime Minister is not enough. He must abolish all taxes everywhere. When will the Prime Minister finally announce his complete withdrawal of this carbon tax?
Yeah, when hell freezes over.
The Honourable Minister. Mr. Speaker, it's always rather difficult for me to
I've never seen Guilbeault so busy.
after this member who, because for many years she was part of the first North American
There's more BS in that place
put a
today
price
than
on
there has been
carbon.
in a long time.
She was part of the government at the time. I would like to quote an article from La Presse this morning. In Quebec, 265 millimeters of precipitation
Tell
fell,
the
a
truth
record
to save his life,
that
because
no
his
since
life
1940.
is immersed
The impact of climate change
in
exists,
climate
especially
change
in
talking
agriculture.
points,
It increases the
which
cost
are all
of
lies.
food. In agriculture in Quebec, $150,000 million of damages. Everyone pays for this, Mr. Speaker. The Honourable Member for Bellechasse, Les Échemins-Lévis. Mr. Speaker, after 8 years of this Bloc Québécois-supported government, parents are simply fed up. They have to cut back on absolutely everything, including their own children's needs. I don't understand why they're laughing on the other side, because there's nothing funny in what I'm saying. One family in Lévis says they have to pay almost twice as much for food because of inflation. It's expensive to vote for the Bloc Québécois, which wants to radically increase the carbon tax.
Yeah. Want to remark to comment here from Haley Land. Yeah, whoever is out there saying that now they're 5,000. What is this? This is liberal propaganda. These things are cost prohibitive and they're useless. And they're not even carbon neutral. So stop dishing out liberal talking points. Look it up. Go on the internet right now. You don't believe me? Go out and find how much these things cost. You're not going to find a $5,000 or a $10,000 heat pump in Canada installed. Never.
We would love to hear the next question.
And exactly. Who are we buying these heat pumps from? You bet they're going to have ties to the Liberal Party. Oh, you bet. Don't you smell something going on here? Isn't this sound like the usual Trudeau government scam? They're going to benefit somehow from this. Everybody's going to get a heat pump. Well,
Tax with the enthusiastic support of the Bloc Québécois who want to radically increase the price of carbon. The Prime Minister, who is flailing in polls, says that he will give a temporary tax break for people in the Atlantic provinces. What about the rest of the country, Mr. Speaker?
hey, George Binger, you're right. Don Rickles would make a much better speaker. It's embarrassing to be Canadian at times with clowns like this
Minister,
leading the government. And here's another clown. Yeah.
I would like to tell my colleagues that there is a price on pollution.
Right from the
expensive.
circus.
The measures we have implemented, Mr. Speaker, will allow us to improve and accelerate our fight against climate change. We have tangible projects put forward to bring money back into the
It's an illusionary, imaginary fight against climate change. It's just such a crock. Canada only produces
even more.
less than 5% of greenhouse gases. So even if all Canadians live in caves, stop driving cars, stop heating their homes, stop living, we will have no impact at all on global greenhouse gas emissions. And guess what? Those global greenhouse gas emissions affect the globe, not just Canada. So this is how crazy this is. All of this sacrifice, all of this giving, all of this giving up for a cause that is completely fabricated. It will make no difference at all, even if we are in fact in a climate change crisis. Nothing we do in Canada is going to make an impact on that. So this is all about the money, and it's all about a political cause that these liberals think is going to keep them in power and keep people in fear and worry about their future. They want us to go to bed at night worrying about climate change, not worrying about unemployment, not worrying about paying the mortgage, not worrying about the price of groceries. Because they know those issues are their fault. They want us to worry about climate change because, that's a long-term fight. This is horrific.
Let I have député de South Shore St. Margaret's.
After 8 years, the plummeting, panicking Prime Minister admitted his carbon tax is punishing Canadians and making life more unaffordable. Liberals just announced their re-election platform, Vote Liberal, and quadruple the carbon tax on home heating oil after the next election. The Liberal minister from Newfoundland admitted this exemption wasn't granted to Canadians across the country because they don't vote Liberal. Rum bottle politics is back. When will the Prime Minister stop with the Band-Aids and cure the problem he caused and axe the carbon tax?
Mr. Speaker, the honourable member asked us to cure the problem. The problem that we're trying to cure is pollution from home heating oil. Mr. Speaker, by making the investments necessary, we can replace
This guy's he's trying to fly again.
They are cleaner, they create jobs in our communities, and they save thousands of dollars every year for families who live in my community and his. That member has described on this chamber's floor before heat pumps as fairy tale programs. Mr. Speaker, people who live in our communities are going to save
They are
$1,000.
fairy tale programs. Exactly. And this clown knows it.
South Shore St. Margaret's.
Well, heat pumps increase the coal demanded for electricity in Nova Scotia, but NDP Liberals have brought back that rum bottle politics. Vote Liberal, get a free quart of rum, or vote and get a free heat pump. But here's the catch. Liberals promised to quadruple the carbon tax after the next election. Nova Scotians aren't fooled by this bait and switch. This Prime Minister is not worth the cost. When will the Prime Minister stop with his Band-Aid and cure the problem that he caused, which is the carbon tax, and exit?
Mr. Speaker, with great respect to my honourable colleague, I think he has missed the point of this program entirely. He's concerned that people will pay a higher price after the pause has ended and the price comes back into effect. If people install a heat pump, they won't pay it at all, and that is the point. Mr. Speaker, we are making the investments necessary so people can replace a more polluting system with a less polluting system. And since he's mentioned coal, we're working to eliminate that from the grid in Nova Scotia too, which is going to help people in both of our communities.
Oh, it's going to help people so much. Yes, to be unemployed and unable to heat their homes.
Central.
This is the alternate universe of the Liberal Party.
Folks back home are wondering how much tax they'll pay if they vote Liberal in the next election. The Liberal MP for Long Range suggested that they want to be a government that listens to the concerns of Liberal ridings. Her and her constant colleagues voted 24 times to increase the carbon tax to 61 cents per litre. After 8 years, this NDP Liberal government and this Prime Minister is not worth the cost. Will they stop the mass confusion and tell Atlantic Canadians how much carbon tax they'll pay if they vote Liberal in the next election?
The Honourable Minister.
I think, Mr. Speaker, you could say it for the fifth time, and I don't think the answer will get across. The bottom line is, Mr. Speaker, we on this side of the House tried to find a way to make sure that people square affordability with wanting to fight climate change. Both are very important right now. Both are very important to people in Atlantic Canada, very important in my constituency. And I think that we have found a way to do that, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
Ah, the petulant ass.
La député de Bonavista Buren Trinity.
Mr. Speaker, homelessness is on the rise across the country. Sadly, this is a reality facing too many veterans who have bravely served our country. Everyone deserves to have a safe and affordable home. It is vitally important that we do everything in our power to help our homeless veterans. Can the Minister of Veterans Affairs tell us what action the government is taking on this crucial issue? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I first of all want to thank my friend and colleague for this very important question.
Oh, yes. That was a great softball question.
Of our veterans is my top priority. We take this situation very seriously, and that's why our government is investing in a new
totally
program
incompetent.
to combat homelessness when it comes to veterans.
Has
This
no
program
idea
will provide
what her own
rent
department is
supplements,
up to.
support services, as well as important research to really determine what the reasons why veterans are
It's
homeless.
the first time she read that, probably.
Canada's veterans have been there for our country, and Mr. Speaker, we have to be there for them, and we will. Thank you.
Thanks for nothing.
The Honourable Member from Edmonton.
Hey, I'll say it again. The only veterans the Liberal Party and the Liberal government respects are those from the Waffen-SS. Those are the veterans they respect. Those are the ones they invite to the House of Commons for international speeches. Those are the ones they have standing ovations for. And those are the ones they lie about when it's discovered, when it's reported that they organized it. So don't for a minute believe anything liberals say about veterans or about national defense, because they lie about both areas incessantly.
Speaker, we know that at a time when Canadians are struggling with affordability, that food prices are too high, and that's what we've heard right across this country. That's why our government called the 5 largest grocery chain CEOs to Ottawa and worked with them to create action plans that they're implementing to lower and stabilize food prices for Canadians. This is important work. We're tracking their progress, and we'll have more to report soon, Mr. Speaker.
Yeah. They're going to create famine. They're going to create scarcity in the grocery stores. That's the Liberal solution to this. You won't have anything to buy in the grocery store after they get through with this.
Offended, they pay lip service, but nothing is done to change the culture of this institution. The Governor-General spends thousands on meals, alcoholic beverages, luxury hotels, trips, cleaning services, just to name a few. Imagine on a single plane trip, she even spent nearly $1,000 on slices of lime and lemon. You couldn't make this up. So I repeat my question to the government. Does the government intend to cut its $33 million budget because clearly it doesn't seem to be able to manage taxpayers' money seriously and responsibly? The Honourable Minister. Mr. Speaker, the Governor-General does important work for Canada here and throughout the world. And of course, we expect all public office holders to spend every dollar with respect, with rigour, and in a conscientious way, respecting all Canadians. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Unfortunately, that concludes and brings us to the end of our question period. I see that we have a few points of order.
Let's just see what the points of order
The
are.
member for Regina Capel has the floor.
Government's massive and embarrassing about-face last week, I would like to seek unanimous consent for the following motion. That in order to support all Canadians struggling with the cost of living, particularly with winter fast.
So I hate to interrupt the honourable member from Regina Capel. Unfortunately, I'm hearing no's already, which are being offered.
Look at the speaker. What a partisan act.
I'm going to recognize another point of order, but I would ask all members for your cooperation first. Please, if you are seeking unanimous consent, I do ask that you do negotiate.
Anyway, that's good for now, folks. Anyway, thanks for joining us today. We are in very historic times right now, and there's more on the horizon that is even more catastrophic. And Trudeau is after our freedom. We have to do whatever we can to convince this NDP bunch of hypocrites to stop backing this bankrupt government, because it's destroying Canada. It's not just about the fact they're not worth the cost. That is an inane talking point. Justin Trudeau and his Liberal government are destroying Canada. They are catastrophic. They are devastating. And we need a change before he brings this country down around our ears. Thanks for listening today. I'll be back again tomorrow with more. But these are dangerous times. But don't lose hope, because we can still change things. And we have to remember that. So thanks for being a part of this Stand on Guard episode today. I've been your host. I hope you found some of my comments worth listening to. Thank you for sending in your comments. I read them. I try to respond to them while we're on the air. And you guys are marvelous. Thanks for supporting the station. And thanks for being there. And keep fighting. Resolve to resist. And keep fighting this Liberal government, because we need to do that. Thank you so much again. Bye for now. We'll see you all tomorrow.